Hello, and welcome to the HSE Half Hour. My name is Lauren. I'm Head of Networks and Communications here at E&G. Myself, my colleague Laura are going to do this half-hour live show every month, talking all things recruitment, safety, and everything in between. So, over to yourself, Laura.
Hello. How are you? You all right? So welcome everyone. As Lauren said, my name's Laura. I am an Associate Director for HSE Recruitment and Executive Network Group. Basically what that means is I've spent the last 13 years doing, I know it makes me feel old when I say that, 13 years doing health and safety recruitment. And as Associate Director, what I get to do now is loads of the fun stuff as well. So that's going out and meeting all you guys, putting on events to kind of help you with your CPD, working with Lauren and the networks team, and doing these live shows. So yeah, that's me.
Fab. So as Head of Networks at E&G, I work closely with Laura and the Health and Safety team. And myself and the team, we work on creating white papers, industry kind of research and industry trends, and we share this information predominantly with our client network, but we're bringing this to you kind of each month. So this is an interactive show. Please do comment. We'd love to kind of hear your questions and discuss them as and when. So yeah, that's great. Please do throw your comments in. So for today's episode, lucky number 13, I can't believe it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. We're discussing everything gender disparity in safety. So today you probably see shared on the screen, we are showcasing findings from our recent report. So this is around perception on gender disparity in the safety industry, across the safety discipline, multi-sector, data sample of over 250 safety professionals, and this was completed anonymously, so we did get some interesting comments.
We'll go through some of those, won't we?
Yeah, definitely. So this was sent out to our network of safety professionals via LinkedIn, was completed by over 250 as mentioned, and it has given us some good results. So Laura, over to yourself, if you can give us a bit of an overview of this subject. I know that you're ever so passionate about.
I am as a woman in industry, but I mean, even outside of that, I've always been really, really passionate about diversity and inclusion. It's a key area for me, and something that, Executive Network Group, we really, really focus on as well. So I personally have done some stuff with the UK Women in Safety Network. We're hosting some Christmas drinks again for them this year. We've been pretty involved in that with them for 6 or 7 years now. And I've also been on the communications team for One Wish, and One Wish is the global network of women in safety groups. Gender diversity, something I'm pretty keen on, very, very passionate about. And, like I said, I've been in the industry 13 years now, and it is a different place now from where we were, 13 years ago. But it's always interesting to kind of see what the perception is from people that are, on the ground, boots on the ground in health and safety, and what they are kind of coming up against when it comes to this sort of stuff. So I think if we could share some of the stats there, Lauren. So the first thing we kind of asked people on this survey was whether or not they felt there was an issue with gender disparity in their workplace. So I think we've got a graph of these responses, haven't we?
We have. I'm going to. It's slightly smaller, so hopefully I can see.
That's okay. That's okay. If anyone wants a copy, obviously you can let us know and we can send a copy out. But interestingly, because as Laura said, this is about perception, right? Not necessarily about data, because we've done the data reports before. We know that we know the numbers and the figures. And again, if people want copies of that was our remuneration report, which was broken down by diverse sectors. So this is, how do people feel about it? Because I think perception is reality, really. Right? Yes. It doesn't matter how much your company is really, really passionate about pushing diversity. If people within the company don't feel that things are changing, or that, it's a priority for them. So that's why we kind of went the perception route with this. And this first question, I think, really identifies why we asked that question to start with. There's definitely a perceived gap, right, in the industry. Yeah. So only 20% of the people that responded said there's no imbalance. The rest all thought, there's work to be done here. So, look, we weren't massively surprised. So health and safety has been predominantly a male-dominated industry for a number of years. And like I said, the tide is changing. It's really, really encouraging when I go out to these events now. And, I went to HSE Congress, or we both went to HSE Congress, didn't we, a couple of months ago. And it was really, really encouraging to see that the percentages in the room were definitely shifting. So look, it's not bad news, but there is still a perception in most workplaces that there's an issue. And I think one of the interesting things, like I said, the tide has been changing with this, and we've really noticed it anecdotally with our safety recruitment. So what we're finding is actually when we're presenting shortlists for clients now, they are becoming more diverse than they previously were. And we've talked about this a little bit before, but I think it's a direct response to the pandemic and how workplaces have changed off the back of that. So things like flexible working has made a huge impact on gender disparity. We had clients who previously were so strict, and it was 9 to 5 in the office, Monday to Friday. That's it, bums on chairs. And that discounted a lot of people who had childcare issues or caring issues or stuff like that. And so that's made a really, really big difference. As well as just clients being more willing to kind of think outside the box on who they hire. They're not so stringently stuck in these old school models. They are thinking more about soft skills and culture fits and things like that. So that all is really, really helping. But like we said, the numbers, when it comes to perception is reality. And the perception is, for most of our respondents, that there's kind of an issue in terms of the gender balance. Can we share the next slide as well?
Yeah, sure. So just to, I suppose, clarify, because we've had a couple of comments already.
Okay, cool.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you very much for this. We've had some people that say, internationally that there's a big gap. In the Caribbean, for example, this data is based solely UK data, but I'm not going to say it's not reflective internationally. But the data that we've got was UK focused from our UK network, and as I say, some interesting kind of perception on here. So we kind of next asked about equality, diversity, and inclusion strategies. So mainly around, does your business have a strategy? Is it a priority? And 66% of respondents, they did report that yes, the business think it's important, so a large majority, and only 15% said no, it's not a business priority for us at the moment. So I think that's quite telling, and it's also important to say, the respondents from the survey that we did online were from all different backgrounds, some high risk industries such as your construction and your manufacturing, right through energy and utilities, right through to kind of public sector and everything in between. So we got a real mixed view on here, which is quite interesting, isn't it, Laura?
Absolutely, yeah. And we talked a lot about this appetite for change, and I think this really demonstrates that, doesn't it? It says that nearly 3/4 of the people surveyed says there needs to be more education around this, along with the companies that already have strategies and things like that. People are crying out for this stuff, and again, anecdotally, that is really, really reflected in the clients and the people that we're working with at the moment. Yeah,
definitely. So we also saw, as an industry, there is an appetite for more education on this. So a whopping 73% of people said, it might not be a priority, it might be, but there should be more education around ED&I, bias to remove that, implementing inclusive practices is really important. So I think that there's a big appetite for change, isn't there, Laura?
Absolutely, 100%, and I think that's really, really important. I can see, actually, just before we move on, there's a really interesting point from Anne. Can you see that, Lauren?
Yes, and I'm flicking between the two.
Multitasking.
Thank you there, Laura. We have got an interesting point around the breakdown of perception of imbalance. So via industries, maybe there's a fit for more feminine traits and leadership than others, and I think that is a really great point. Further into the survey, we did ask respondents, which I think we do cover today, don't we, Laura, about overall, their thoughts on what female leadership, and we'll get to that shortly, and do they think there's an issue. There was kind of some free text boxes which did put some controversial comments, but it was raised quite a few times that a lot of people felt there was a gender imbalance between, of course, female male in high risk industries where perhaps men do come into the safety industry from the tour sometimes, or they might have more kind of, hands-on experience as opposed to going straight through the safety route. Therefore, there's a bigger gap. And there was quite a few comments on that, which we will cover. But yeah, a great point, Anne, and thank you for kind of pointing that out. So we will move on to the next page. Technology is not on my side, which is gender-based discrimination and bias. So we asked, this was a personal experience here, not just perception, but have you personally experienced any gender-based discrimination or bias in the health and safety industry? And again, not shocking, but not ideal that, I think it was 15% said frequently, 39% said occasionally. So
which is too much, isn't it? Even 1%
straight away
is too much. So I agree with you. I think this is a really interesting point. And again, why we kind of looked at perception this time rather than just looking at straight data, because this is about how people feel in the workplace, right? Because that's so important, particularly when you're recruiting for, if we're recruiting for a client, it's about cultures and it's about the way that people integrate once they join the company. It's all very well and good looking at diversity, but if your inclusivity isn't there and people feel like once they join the company, they're still being discriminated against, they're not going to stick around. So it's a really, really important question. And I think what was also interesting is we saw that sort of 41% of respondents said they didn't think there was enough representation at a senior level for them as well within their company. So although it's not a majority, it's a big number, right? And I think this data has changed from the last time we did this survey, which was
2021.
21 years ago. So that data has changed, and that number has come down, which is good. But again, it's still too big a number, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose, Laura, if I can ask you, with your industry expertise, how does gender disparity impact the industry? How is this affecting businesses with the imbalance in safety?
It's a really interesting question. Again, we could talk about this subject for hours because this is just such an interesting subject to me. But people like to see themselves reflected in the workplace. So if you are working as a woman in industry and you don't see anybody in a leadership role that looks like you, that understands your point of view, that makes you feel included, that makes you feel like the company gets you and gets your issues, or understands the things that you might be facing, that really, really is not helpful from an inclusivity point of view. Like we said, you can have all the diversity policies you want, and you can hire all the diverse hires you want, but if your culture isn't right, and leadership isn't reflective of the business, then people don't stick around. And there's we always talk about this from an ethical and moral point, right? Because it's an ethical and moral issue, but there is genuinely a business side to this, which I always think is good for people to know, because sometimes businesses they think about the bottom line, right? So that's it. They're there to make money. They need to know why it's important to them. So there is a lot of information out there that kind of backs up the business point of view for this, for having gender diversity and having good diversity. So there was a recent study from McKinsey and Co. I said recent, a couple of years ago, but it found that companies that were in the top quartile for gender diversity on their executive teams were 25% more likely, to have above average profitability than their counterparts. So that's a big number. That's a really, really big number.
It is. It's a business case, definitely.
Exactly. So even if your CEO doesn't care about the ethical or the moral standpoint, the business case here is if you do not think about gender diversity within your company and you don't think about it within your leadership and your executive teams, you're not going to do as well as your competition, and that's just kind of fact. And the thing that's interesting, obviously we're talking about gender diversity here today, but the same study showed that looking outside of gender and looking at diversity in general, when those companies had greater representation in terms of all kinds of diversity, so sexuality, ethnicity, all of that stuff, the companies were outperforming even more. I think the number then went up into like the 30s. So there's a real business case here for this sort of stuff. Even if they don't care about the moral, let's a
commercial case.
Exactly, get them thinking about the commercial case. The bottom line is, if they want to be in business in 10 years, you've got to look at your D&I. And it's the other way of trying to get them to think about this, right, is just thinking about it as though if you hire, say, 10 clones, for use of a better word, and they're all from the same background and they have the same education, they tend to think in very similar ways. So you're not getting those fresh ideas, you're not getting those fresh perspectives. So if you want to be cutting edge and you want to stay ahead of the competition, you've got to have that fresh perspective. If you are a company that wants to, for example, sell into Latin America, and you don't have anyone from Latin America sitting within your leadership team or your marketing team, or you're really going to be at a disadvantage there. So that's kind of why it helps. And particularly in relation to health and safety, it is an industry where there's an aging population. We're getting a really, really big gap in the workforce now of people that have come into it as second industry. They're kind of aging out of the industry. They're retiring early, which was exacerbated by COVID. Loads of people retired early. If we don't make sure that we're an industry that appeals to diversity, whether that's gender or whatever, we're not going to get more fresh people.
Agreed.
It's simple as that. Skills shortage.
Agreed, Laura. So just to jump in there, we've had a couple more fantastic comments. Just to, I suppose, echo what you were saying, really. Anne's put a great point in about diversity in decision making is vital. So this is why women's issues are not necessarily factored into risk assessment policies. And fortunately, this is slowly changing, she said. But again, I think that comes down to even things when there was a massive discussion on women's PPE and safety. There was wrongly so, but a big deal made over something that you just think would be
norm.
Exactly. But it isn't. People are still having to fight for very basic kind of things in risk assessments. And Marisa has also said, some of her best hires, talking about gender disparity and kind of, retaining staff. Some of her best hires are the fact that she offers term time only kind of roles to give them flexibility, which is a real flexible approach to working patterns, which is
really great.
That is definitely thinking outside the box.
It is, and exactly that's what we're trying to get across here. It's about new ways of thinking, right? We can't just keep doing stuff the same way. What's that? It's the Einstein quote, isn't it? If you keep doing things the same way and expecting a different outcome, that's the definition of insanity. And great point from Anne as well about that diversity in decision making and why women's issues aren't being considered. I've talked about this before, but if anyone hasn't read the book Invisible Women, I totally recommend it. Fantastic read. It's all about data, but it's really, really fascinating. And the idea that basically women aren't considered in most data-driven decisions because male is seen as the norm. So that's why women, for example, get more disproportionately hurt in car accidents, because car crash dummies and the way they're tested are based on standard male physiology. So really, really interesting, just on that point.
Well, I've skipped a couple of pages on our report, and what I'll do is I will put the link to this report in the comments so you can download it and of course go through it at your leisure. And I should actually shout out to Marisa, who's on here today, because she actually contributed towards our report. So thank you very much for that. Please do download and have a read. Free download, of course. So we're going to jump to discuss what is actually being done, what methods can help, what initiatives can help, address this issue and help out, before we get on to some of the controversial comments that
which we have to cover. We have to make sure we have time to cover those.
We have to. So it's not all bad news. Over to you, Laura. How can we remove this bias and appeal to a wider audience from a hiring perspective?
Cool. Love this question. I talk about this a lot. So look, there's loads of good things that have come out of this. I know sometimes it sounds like maybe we're a little bit negative talking about, the impact and the leadership and stuff like that. But there are good things that have come out of this, and there are really, really great and simple things that companies can do to instantly try and change not just their gender diversity, but their diversity hiring, overall. So one thing is taking CVs out of the equation, right? Which sounds daft when you first say it, because CVs tell you what a person does. But CVs really, really give away a lot about a person. For a start, they usually have your name on it, so people know what sex you are. Sometimes the name gives away your ethnicity. People can see where you went to school, which kind of gives away your socioeconomic status. There's loads and loads of giveaways on a CV. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there is a thing called unconscious bias, which means that sometimes people don't realize they're discriminating against you because of certain features. Maybe they just assume that a man would be better for the job, and they don't even realize they're making that assumption. There is also as well conscious bias where they are choosing to pick someone over someone else. So you take CVs out of the equation entirely, and you ask people to answer competency questions as their application for a role. That straight away, it gets rid of that problem, because what you're doing is you're looking at genuinely whether that person can do the job. It doesn't matter, how long they've been doing it. It doesn't matter what their education was. It doesn't matter, what part of the world they live in. What you're asking is, okay, have you dealt with this situation before? Can you tell me how you dealt with it? How would you deal with it here? And you're getting a real genuine understanding about whether that person can do the job, just with no outside factors being considered. Yeah. So that's a really, really good one that we do often recommend. The other one is a little bit trickier, and one that a lot of people don't tend to think about, but it's actually the step before the applications, which is about how you advertise and how you appeal to people. So a good example someone used once with me is that, say you want to hire more women into a certain position, and you're not getting any applications from women, but you only ever advertise, say, in the Guardian newspaper. You're only ever going to get a certain type of person who reads that and responds. So you're not giving yourself the opportunity to even find those diverse people in the first place. So looking at those methods of advertising can be really, 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 really important. So whether that's, what sort of job boards do we use? Do we use a headhunter? Do we take away certain criteria that are maybe making it difficult for diverse people to apply? And whether that's, the hours, the flexi working, whether it's, we only accept people with a certain degree from a certain university, even though that's not really relevant to the role, that can be discounting people. So just looking at where you advertise, how you advertise, the language you use when you advertise, and what you're asking for. And then the final bit is it comes back to that perception again. Is your industry attractive to diverse candidates? Is your company attractive to diverse candidates? And again, there's really good things you can do to help with that, and that's about promoting the good work that your people do, so people can see who works for you and what they're doing that's great. That's about getting involved in socioeconomic things. That's about getting involved in local charities and supporting getting women back into the workplace. Or you've got some of the big companies who go and take part in Pride, things like that just show, look, we are an inclusive employer.
Actually inclusive, not a tick box exercise. Are these people going to be welcomed, and there's going to be an actual initiative in place to retain this talent? Because again, it goes back to the business case. And just to touch on the advertising, Laura, you mentioned language, and there's been so many studies, firstly around the gender imbalance of, it's more likely that women will read a specification, mainly an advertisement, and go, I don't tick every single box on here, therefore I'm not going to apply. Whereas men probably, will have the same. They may only tick 50% of the box, but are more likely to apply. So it's around how you advertise, but also the language. There is a difference, as crazy as it sounds, between masculine and feminine language. And there's kind of tools online now. I know there's so many AI tools to help out with writing, but I think they're great, but to add authenticity into it. And there's actually a tool that says who your who this will, demographic wise, how your writing will appeal. Is it too masculine? Is it feminine? How is it balanced? So there's a couple of tools that you can use. And before we get on to the last part of our session today, we have had a great comment from Ed. So thank you for this, Ed. He mentions, recruiting two of his very best hires have been through internal development. So he believes, we can teach anyone safety laws, but teaching attitude, aptitude, and ability to engage is much harder. So recruiting on that, as opposed to qualifications on a CV, again comes back to thinking outside the box, and a very competitive, talent demand over the last few years, as you've seen, Laura. Our clients have had to think, these people aren't just going to move sideways, they're going to move kind of upwards. And I know we've had a talent attraction session, and we can talk about all this stuff all day, but I know we've got a few minutes left, so I'll take us to the kind of last part of this. I know that it's not really legible for us all to read, but this was where we had a part in our survey that stated, you know, tell us your thoughts about it, what can be done to help out with addressing this, not just from a talent acquisition point of view, but, you know, day to day, what can your company do? And people did say education, implementing strategies. There was a few different things, but we did have some comments that were very much like, this is a woke agenda, there's no issue at all, women can't work in construction, manufacturing, mining, they haven't got the strength in safety, they don't possess this, they haven't got any on the tools knowledge, they won't be listened to. And that kind of really reiterated the point of why we did this survey. But yeah, I did get called woke quite a few times.
You did. You did get called woke, yeah. And I think that to me, I was actually still, we're laughing about it, it's not actually funny, but to me that was so eye-opening, because if you remember, this survey only went out to safety professionals, right? This is direct people in the industry, and the fact we were still having those comments coming back off that just blew my mind a little bit, because it was like, okay, so this is why we're doing it, because there is 100% still a perception from people that were answering saying, you know, like you said, it's not necessary, or women can't do the job, or women are just moaning, I think was one of the comments.
Yeah, they're just moaning that they're not getting the opportunities because men are better. And it goes back to that unconscious bias, doesn't it? If companies have got
in this case.
Well, yes, but if companies have got a very fair promotion, training, you know, competency level, then it isn't just women moaning. If they're seeing actual conscious bias, then they're not moaning. There is an issue. So Laura, can you tell us very quickly about the solutions that were covered on the graph and what people had kind of said there?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we talked a lot about that conscious unconscious bias thing. I think that's a really interesting solution about providing that unconscious bias training, and I've been through it myself, and it is really eye-opening. It's very, very interesting. So that's a good one. We looked at implementing diversity and inclusion programs, like we said, just having these conversations and thinking about your ways of recruiting and thinking about your ways of being more inclusive, and starting to make steps in that direction. That's a really, really big one. That's always going to help you. The promotion of work-life balance policies, that came out quite high out of the survey. Again, like we said, just making work more accessible for people. You know, it's a new world now. We've got all this technology. We don't have to be chained to your desk 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. We can be more open and you know, try different things. And then offering mentorship and sponsorship opportunities. And to me, I think that's one of the more important ones, because like we said, if you don't see someone that looks like you in industry, if you don't have anybody to look up to, that is really, really disheartening. And if you can get a mentor who is, you know, a woman in industry, or somebody diverse that reflects who you are, that can help you, you know, who's been through these struggles and who knows the issues you're facing and wants to support you, I mean, that is just massive, I would think. And one last point on that, I remember I had a lady who came to speak to me after an event a number of years ago now, when I was talking about feminism and diversity. You know, I talk about it a lot. And she said, you know, this is all great, but yeah, I just don't think there is anyone that looks like me in industry, in leadership. I don't know anybody that I could look up to or that I could speak to. And my advice to her was, okay, that's a really tough position to be in, but please then you go be that person. Because, you know, there will be thousands of others like you that also don't have anybody to look up to. So please push yourself forward and, you know, really, really try and, you know, change the perception so that other people can look up to you.
Great, and great advice, Laura. So I think that brings us very much to the end of our session, and it was very hard to fit that in. We've got so much to talk about, and we could be talking about this all day, but I've put the link to the actual report in the comments, so please do have a download, have a read of it, and you can see all of the data on there. As I say, perception data and the actual gender data is on our remuneration report as well, which covers all protected characteristics. So from today, from what I've learned from you, Laura, I know that you are very passionate about this subject, but again, you know, gender bias needs addressing, think about the language when you're hiring, think about blind CVs, and ultimately trying to create inclusive cultures. Industry sector is perceived as, as well as the jobs that you're asking people to do. So what is the reputation of safety? What is the, reputation of your business? How can we attract female leaders? There's such a big conversation around this, but again, flexibility can really help when hiring to do this. So what are we doing for the next instalment then, Laura? We've got one coming up in September, of course.
Next instalment. So we'll have a special guest again with us next month, which would be great. So we've got Phil Roberts. He's coming to join us, and we're going to be talking all about empowering safety practitioners. So hopefully it should be a really, really action point packed one for you. So you can come away with some real points to go away and help you empower the team around you. And yourself, of course.
Yes. And one very last comment that I've seen, and Anne, I hope you don't mind me saying this out loud on our session, of course, is Anne did volunteer as a contact for women approaching about visibility, happy to be an informal mentor.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, thank you, Anne.
So thank you so much. Thank you for the comments today. Really enjoyed the session, and I hope that you have too. And we will see you in September. Have a lovely bank holiday weekend. And as I say, report is there to be downloaded in the comments. Thank you all.
See you next month. Bye.
See ya. Bye.